All right, man, peace. So, brothers, the NBA free agency season kicked off last night, July 1st at midnight. And, of course, as many of you know, there were many big-time acquisitions. And sometimes the biggest acquisitions are just re-signings of your own team's major stars. And that's what we see with the Houston Rockets and Mr. Chris Paul, who re-signed with the team on a 4-year deal worth $160 million. So, of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Free agency has begun.
Here we go.
We've got another giant deal here from Woj.
Give it to us. Read for us, please.
Chris Paul has agreed to a 4-year, $160 million max contract to stay with the Rockets, which is a huge deal for Chris Paul at age.
That is a huge deal for Chris Paul. As Brian Windhorst is about to state, he's 33 years old. That deal is going to carry him to the age of 37. Do I think that he'll still be a very impactful player at that age? Yes, I do. Do I think that the Houston Rockets are going to be a championship contender for all 4 years while he's there? Pretty much, yes, I do. They will have to bring in a third guard to spell both him and Harden over the course of that deal, though. Because by the end of Chris Paul's deal, even James Harden, I believe, is going to be over 30 years old. Because I believe that the brother right now is, 27, 28? How old is James Harden? He can't be any younger than 28. He might be 29, about to be 30. Because I believe that he, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Love, they all came into the NBA at around the same time, and they're all around the same age. And Steph Curry just turned 30, so James Harden can't be any younger than 28. This current Chris Paul deal that he just signed is going to carry James Harden into his early 30s. Their window right now, to me, is over the next 2 years. I grew up watching John Stockton. He was still a very impactful player into his late 30s, and the load on him was more than what Chris Paul has right now. That load that was on John Stockton, because he was still expected to commandeer the entire offense. In regards to the Houston Rockets, Chris Paul is being spelled by James Harden. Now, the NBA pace is faster today, so that may impact Chris more in this era. But we'll see. Once again, they're going to have to bring in a third guard, most likely a couple of years from now, at the very most a couple of years from now, maybe even by next season, and make that more of a 3-guard rotation.
Age 33, but short of the 5 years max that he could have gotten, and represents, I think, a fair deal for both sides.
It's a compromise, right?
But and Chris Paul is a guy who, also gave up money last year by doing the thing he did. He stays and gets the big payday instead of looking around. So,
right, but how much money did he really give up? He's playing for the Houston Rockets. Texas has no state tax. So if he would have stayed with the Clippers, not demanded that trade, he would have ended up making less money overall than he would have playing for the Houston Rockets.
So that's a major thing to get that done as well. There's deals flying through here.
Chris Paul, the head of the Players Union, who in the last collective bargaining agreement, one of the things that didn't get a ton of headlines, but we of course all discussed and noticed, they edged up the maximum age that you could get that big money at. It used to be you could get that big money at sign a contract and to get it until 36. He extended it to be until 38. And
yes, that's very smart of him. Very intelligent. What also did not get many headlines is the fact that Chris Paul demanded that the NBA not test for HGH or other forms of performance-enhancing drugs. I wonder why.
And look what happened. Now he's signing a contract.
Smart young man.
Where he's getting it until age 37.
He had a really good year in Houston. He loved that city. So I think he really wanted to stay in Houston, and this was the right place for him. And they're a game again. Guys, they are one game away from being in the NBA Finals last.
People love to state how the Houston Rockets were just one game away from the NBA Finals. Well, you know what? Their performance in last year's Western Conference Finals did not carry over into next year. They've already lost Trevor Ariza. There's a good chance that they're also going to lose Mr. Clint Capella. So how will their team look next year? The Golden State Warriors were one Andre Iguodala injury away from winning that series in 5 games over the Houston Rockets.
Last year, he gets hurt and goes down. So you got to believe in Houston that they feel if he's healthy, that they got a great chance of beating the Golden State Warriors. So I think he wants to be all in, along with James Harden, who's our MVP this year. Clint Capella, who's emerged as a great center as well.
They lost Trevor Ariza. Trevor Ariza has signed with the Phoenix Suns on a 1-year deal worth $15 million. That is going to impact them against the Golden State Warriors. Trevor Ariza was expected to be one of the primary defenders against Kevin Durant.
well. So they got some great pieces there, and I think they feel really good about where they're headed.
And he's tweeted that they've got unfinished business, and they want to run it back. And you're right, Byron. I think regardless of what happens here, when the Rockets look at the lay of the land, they don't think that there's going to be that big of a gap for them to overcome. They don't think that the Lakers, even if they get LeBron, are going to be able to overcome that. And
No. The Lakers, just with LeBron James, will not beat the Houston Rockets. They also will not beat the Golden State Warriors. The real question for the Houston Rockets and their coaching staff is how much do they decide to moderate Chris Paul's minutes when thinking about his potential for getting hurt in the playoffs due to playing too many minutes during the regular season. As it was, he missed about 20 games and his body still wore down by the Western Conference Finals.
They want to keep the team together. That's why I think it's a very strong possibility that they're going to re-sign Clint Capella and try the best that they can to re-sign Trevor Ariza, even though they may be heading towards around $50 million in luxury tax payments to do so.
Well, you don't have to worry about that because Trevor Ariza is gone.
Well, I have a new owner there. I think he knew what he was getting into when he bought this team, and certainly I've spoken to him. He likes being competitive and in the mix, and this is what they're going for. It is interesting to me, though, when you talk about running it back, you never actually truly run it back the NBA because everyone gets a year older.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great point, Rachel Nichols. One of the rare times that you make a great point. As I've already stated, your performance from the previous season does not carry over into the next season. The Houston Rockets could easily lose to the Golden State Warriors in 5 games in the Western Conference Finals next year. Hell, I could easily see the Houston Rockets losing in the second round in the Western Conference semifinals to a team that has vastly improved from the previous season for whatever reason. Maybe because another team in the Western Conference is healthy. Look at a team like the Utah Jazz. If they were able to make a quantum leap due to playoff experience, they could give the Rockets a run. The series with the Rockets went, 5 games, 6 games, however many games it went. I think it went 5 games. And had they had Ricky Rubio and a little bit more playoff experience, that series could have gotten hairy. There are going to be other teams that are going to be better than they were last year. A trip to the conference finals is not promised for the Rockets.
And, we saw Chris get injured a few times this year. I think the way he plays, just all out, right? You certainly, Byron, know him better than anyone.
Not only does Chris Paul play all out, but oftentimes he's not in proper control of his anxiety, which causes his body to tighten up. I think that it leads to a lot of the leg injuries that he suffers from. Very similar to his homeboy LeBron James, who when he's put under a high level of stress tends to cramp up.
He's going to have these injuries now and again, and it might come at a key time like it did last postseason.
You just hope it don't come at that key time like it did this year, because Chris he only knows how to play one way.
Yeah.
He's going to go 110% every single game, every single minute that he's on the basketball floor. That's just him. That's how competitive he is, and that's how he plays the game of basketball. So during that 82-game season, he's going to have some injuries. There's no doubt about it. You just hope.
Well, actually, the type of injuries that he needs to have are strategically planned injuries by the Rockets so that they can rest him. Because you cannot play Chris Paul all 82 games and expect him to be operating on optimal levels in the playoffs. Not at this stage of his career. He's been in the NBA now for how many years? This is going to be his 14th season? He's 33, 34 years old, but he's an older 34. He has a lot of mileage on those tires. And it's not a surprise that those tires burst in the most crucial moment last year in the playoffs. When you combine his age as well as his anxiety level, that is going to happen again. And certain players are just injury prone like that. They just cannot escape it. I think that they put too much onus on James Harden and Chris Paul to be the prime movers in their offense due to the fact that they don't move the ball quite well enough to compete with a team like Golden State when Golden State is fully armed. I truly think that people are underrating how big of an impact losing Iguodala had on that series. And it's going to be different next season if Iguodala is healthy and all the primary parts on the Golden State Warriors are fully healthy. And from what I understand, Golden State is trying to think of a way to bring on Dwight Howard.
Hope that when you get to the playoffs that he's completely healthy and that he stays healthy throughout the playoffs, because if he does, then you got to really good chance.
The thing about this is, with this contract, they're committing to pay him in the $40 million range when he's 35 and 36. Okay, they're not going to pay him $50 million when he's 38. But this is an investment in now, in what they can do next year, and maybe in 2 years. But Chris Paul is a smaller guy. Those guys' careers don't necessarily always reach out.
That's partially true, but Chris Paul is so highly skilled that if they reel back his minutes a little bit, bring in some help, maybe diversify their offense a little more, they can elongate his career and the potency of his career if they do so shrewdly.
They understand that they're going to be paying Chris Paul the highest salaries of his career.
May I tell you what year 4 is?
Yes.
$44 million for year 4.
And even though he's an all-time great, he is not going to be an all-time great at age 36. I mean, maybe he'll define.
By age 36, if he's still relatively healthy and the Rockets are reserved in how they use him, he could still be a top 10 point guard in the league. He could still be a top 10 to top 15 most impactful player in the league, because the way that Chris Paul can control an offense due to his brain, his overall understanding on how to pace the game, he's extremely impactful. He's one of the top 10 most impactful players in the NBA today. And I believe that by 36, if they're reserved in how they use him, he can still do so. He can still be that person, as long as they do so in an intelligent way.
He'll defy the odds, but I wouldn't get it. And that's what Houston is committing to tonight. And they had to think about this one for a while, but they committed tonight to this number.
I think
they had to think about it for a while, but by midnight at the beginning of the free agency season, he was already signed to a 4-year, $160 million contract. Brian Windhorst, I don't think they had to think about it that long.
I think they had to do it, right? And I think
they did it.
They had to. I mean, they were so close this year. And, I covered that series, and I remember thinking, well, if Andre Iguodala doesn't get hurt, maybe the Warriors win in 5. But
no maybe about it. Look at how close games 4 and 5 were. Even without Iguodala in game 4, the Warriors had a pronounced lead that they gave away at the end of the game due to poor focus, lack of execution, and Chris Paul pretty much taking over the game, just making crazy shots. If you would have had Iguodala, he would have nullified a lot of the impact of Chris Paul, because Iguodala is the most cerebral player on the Golden State Warriors, and he would have been able to match up with Chris Paul, who's pretty much the only cerebral player on the Rockets. Game 5 pretty much came down to the last possession. You had Quinn Cook taking a wide open three-pointer. This is without Iguodala in Houston and with Chris Paul playing. That series was still there for the Golden State Warriors to take control of, even without Iguodala. When you add him, that takes him over the hump. Iguodala's very, very impactful. He may be the most important bench player in the entire NBA.
But he did get hurt. And then if Chris Paul doesn't get hurt, I think the Rockets would have won that.
I think so too.
I think he was going to will them. He was not going to let them lose the way he was playing in that series, and then he just couldn't go in the last game there. And it was, you look at that. They had to bring that back. They had to run it back. The question was it going to be 4 years or 5 years? And at this point, they're committed to this team going forward, but they have less and less ability to improve that team. You get older, you get hurt.
I'm never ruling anything out with Daryl Morey.
That's right.
That's right. But he was hoping to get one more big piece.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's not going to happen.
Well, okay, but yes, here's the thing about running this back also. Look, Chris came there a little bit taking a risk, right? There's disagreement over whether the Clippers really were going to offer him a 5-year max from what I know you're...
There was no risk in Chris Paul deciding that he was going to force a trade to the Houston Rockets. In light of how he views his own legacy, he had to make that move. It was either now or never. He was 32 years old when he forced that trade. If he was going to stay in that cesspool known as the LA Clippers locker room and that organization, he was never going to be able to lead that team to a championship. They had a very poor mix, and to be quite frank with you, the overall architecture of that team was antiquated. They were not built to beat the elite level teams in the NBA. Chris Paul understood that, and he saw how good the Rockets were even before he got there. James Harden was leading that team to mid-50 win level regular seasons with basically no other impactful perimeter players. So that's why when Chris Paul was added to the lineup, they were able to jump up to a 65 win level team. The question for the Rockets is now, in regards to their approach for this up and coming regular season, is do we decide to go all out and win as many games in the regular season as we can, like we did last year, or do we try to reel it back like the Golden State Warriors do to try to protect some of our older veterans so that hopefully they're at optimal performance levels by some of the late rounds in the playoffs when we're going to need them the most? I don't think that the Houston Rockets are good enough to just basically coast during the regular season. They have to get home court again for the playoffs. So they're in a bit of a pickle. They're in a bit of a conundrum. It's going to take anywhere from 65 to 68 wins in the regular season to have home court, because if the Golden State Warriors are anywhere near healthy, they're going to win 64 to 65 regular season games by mistake. By mistake, they're going to win that many games. So the Rockets are pretty much in the position with an older squad that they're going to have to go all out again in the regular season and just hope that Chris Paul does not get hurt in big moments in the playoffs.
Your reporting says they haven't, with other ESPN reporting the other way. Regardless, he by opting in and gambling, what if he had a career-ending injury during this year? Like, what if, he gave some...
What does that really mean, Rachel Nichols? What if you walk outside and a dog comes and bites you in your throat and you can't talk anymore on television? Injuries are a part of sports, but you can't make decisions based off of what if somebody has a career-ending injury and he's a top-shelf player. As the GM for the Oklahoma City Thunder recently quoted from A Tribe Called Quest, scared money don't make money. Fortune favors the bold.
Gave some money back when he went to Houston so they could find PJ Tucker. And again, he's getting it now, but it was a gamble. Yeah. It was an act of trust for him to go to Houston. And if Houston had walked away, I think, from him and that deal, and they had renounced him and gone in another direction, again, he's the head of the Players Union. Yeah. He's very popular. He's got a lot of friends around the NBA. I think that would have been very bad organizationally for the Rockets. And you know what?
Well, really what the Rockets were trying to do with Chris Paul was see how much they could negotiate him down. I don't think that they ever really had any intention of not honoring what they told him verbally, but it does behoove them as a corporation, as a business, to see if they can argue him down or negotiate him down in some way, shape, or form. He is 33 years old, but if he stuck to his guns, they were going to re-sign him regardless. There's not another player in the NBA that can replace a Chris Paul and what he does, who's currently available on the market.
They've now got, between James Harden, who signed a record deal last year, and Chris Paul, they've now got in excess of $350 million invested in their backcourt.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, a lot of money. While I know Les Alexander, their longtime owner, sold the team because he wanted to focus on charity, part of the reason why I think he sold the team was he looked and said, you know what? It's going to cost an awful lot of money to keep this backcourt together. Yeah. Why don't I take my $2 billion and see if somebody else wants to pay for it? Because that's a lot invested.
I know we all talk about these salaries, like you can't even wrap your mind around $44 million for a player who's going to be as old as he is. But you know what?
No, actually, you can wrap your mind around $44 million for a great player, no matter the age, when you understand the allure, the charisma that they bring to the basketball court, how it attracts fans, how it's going to result in higher revenue in regards to concessions, parking, attendance, cable television deals. They're more than worth how much they signed for.
But you know what? There's a reason why that franchise sold for over $2 billion. Yes. There's a reason why the rights fees are exploding, why Amazon and Netflix and everybody wants to get in on the NBA. They're worth it. Yeah. The real stars in this league are worth it. And I know the average fan sees that and can't believe how much money these guys are making. They probably are worth it. And they're the real stars in this league.
And they're not worth it emotionally. You're saying they're actually worth it in terms of dollars and cents. They generate that kind of money.
They might be worth more.
Right. Yeah. So, look, LeBron James is never going to...
They're absolutely worth more, Ramona Shelburne. And I don't know why she stated that and then looked at Byron Scott to see if he was going to agree, as if she was saying something so magnanimous or agreeable for players, as if people don't already know that. When a LeBron James signs a so-called max deal for $40 or $45 million, you're getting him for cheap, because he could probably sign for 5 times that, and that would be more equivalent to what he's bringing to a franchise in regards to overall earning potential.
Never going to get paid as much as he is worth to a franchise. We have reports today that if you bring LeBron James to your franchise value automatically goes up $60 or $70 million just when he signs his name on the piece of paper. We'll say to the Cavaliers, you've talked about this, how much franchise value they will lose if he leaves that team. And look, there's no question, the prize of the summer, LeBron James. Wow.
You know what's bad news for the Cavs is that they got their luxury tax bill today.
52.
Oh, well, too bad for the Cavs. That's pretty much it on this storyline regarding Mr. Chris Paul. We'll see how him deciding to re-sign with the Houston Rockets may translate to a higher potentiality for them to win a championship. I think that they're in a very difficult position right now, to be quite honest with you. The Rockets remind me of a lot of great contending teams that I saw growing up that may just not have enough to get over the hump unless they're extremely fortunate and lucky, but we'll find out. So peace.